Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up. Listen to me. Listen to your
With the collapse of the oil embargo to force Iran into a confrontation over the Straits of Hormuz, the US and Israel are looking for another way to get the long-sought war with Iran started, and more to the point, need to make it look like Iran is starting hostilities in order to make it politically and more difficult for Russia and China to support Iran. Now, recall that Israel has a past history of attacking US warships and framing others to trick the US into attacks on Israel's enemies, with the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty, initially blamed on Egypt, as the most well-known example. So here we have the USS Enterprise, the oldest carrier in the fleet, on her last legs, scheduled to be decommissioned next year. Her name is well known in part because of the Star Trek TV series. Decommissioning a nuclear aircraft carrier is a very expensive process. USS Enterprise is powered by 8 nuclear reactors, all of which must be disposed of as nuclear waste material along with all the associated machinery. The US Navy would save a great deal of money, more than the scrap worth of the steel, if USS Enterprise were to be sunk in the Persian Gulf, where the radioactive mess is someone else's problem to deal with. So why send an ancient warship at the end of a useful life into harm's way? The same reason Franklin Roosevelt moved a bunch of obsolete warships from San Diego to Pearl Harbor, while their newer carriers and warships were well away from Hawaii on December the 7th, 1941. Israel has 3 Dolphin submarines, given to her by Germany. They have been seen transiting the Suez Canal in the past and could well be operating in the Gulf of Oman, even the Persian Gulf by now, lying in wait for a used-up and obsolete warship, more useful as a sacrificial lamb than an actual weapon, a ship with American sailors to be attacked as Israel attacked the USS Liberty, then to be blamed on the designated target, Iran, by a compliant media. If you agree with this analysis, please post this video everywhere you see this carrier story. If we can make them doubt a false flag will be believed, maybe they'll call it off.
It's fight time, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday, February 9, 2012. I'm Aaron Dykes, sitting in for Alex tonight. All indications are for a war with Iran. Meanwhile, we are definitely being occupied here on the, quote, homeland. FEMA camps are getting ready. Homeland Stasi shows no signs of letting up. There's a lot of important news. At the same time, it's a continuation of what our loyal viewers have known for a long time is coming. Now, we have coming up on the broadcast Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the former Reagan administration official, economic expert, and a whole lot more. And we're going to cover his article bluntly titled, "Will Iran Be Attacked?" Of course, there are all kinds of indicators that there are large preparations for that war, open statements from Israel and the U.S., and a whole lot more. But Dr. Roberts makes a lot of interesting points in his article. Not only are there 44 U.S. military bases surrounding Iran and all kinds of statements where Obama's tiptoeing the line of appearing not to encourage or endorse an Israeli strike on Iran, while at the same time trying to appease Democratic peace groups ahead of re-election and appearing to give sanctions time to develop before an attack is on. But there's also the Western finance Russian opposition, which Dr. Roberts points out may kind of bind the hands of Russia in regards to further escalation of Middle East wars, as Putin may have to sort of face his own accusations of being a dictator and an election stealer in March, when a lot of people believe the Iran war could be a go. Now, meanwhile, Dr. Roberts points out in this article, and of course we're going to cover it in detail coming up later in this program, that there's really been a propaganda war against Iran, not just since the Bush administration, but since 1979 when the Shah was thrown out of power. And that's really just been going on. And since so much of this is based on all the false accusations surrounding the nuclear power plants and their real intentions, I just want to show this piece of propaganda from the 70s when the Shah was still in power, when he was a happy Western puppet, and Iran was a good country for a time being, according to the Western globalist press. Guess who's building nuclear power plants? The Shah of Iran is sitting on top of one of the largest reserves of oil in the world. Yet he's building 2 nuclear plants and planning 2 more to provide electricity for his country. He knows the oil's running out, more propaganda, and time with it, but he wouldn't build the plants now if he doubted their safety, more propaganda. He'd wait, as many Americans want to do, but the Shah knows that nuclear energy is not only economical, it's enjoyed a remarkable 30-year safety record. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for Plymouth, Massachusetts, too. And it just goes to show they can spin the facts any way they want, any time they want, depending on what the globalists want to do. We know Iran's been on the hit list, and we really hope the time isn't now, but it's kind of that feeling before World War I when all the countries line up. Now, meanwhile, we have in the news today, U.S. warplanes head to the Gulf at rate not seen in years. That's according to Debka File, another kind of shadowy, nebulous intelligence source, so take it with a grain of salt. But what are we dealing with here? Regional conflicts where the bankers back all sides of the war. As the U.S. and Israel carried on bickering over the right time to strike Iran's nuclear sites, Debka File writes, the war preparations continue to pace. Debka File's military sources report that flight after flight of U.S. warplanes and transports were seen this week cutting eastward through the skies of Sinai on their way to the Gulf destinations, presumably Saudi Arabia, at a frequency not seen in the Middle East for many years. Of course, we know there are many big cruise ships there, big launching pads, ally bases. All the regional players have been tapped, and we really hope this doesn't become World War III or a wider regional conflict. But they have on their hit list Iran and Syria, as I've mentioned many times tonight and other times on this program, and they look like they're going to go forward. We hope they don't do it. Now, some have interpreted Obama's comment that I don't think Israel has made a decision on what they need to do as simply meaning he wants to wait until the sanctions have the appearance of having had their effect before having the strike. We don't know, of course, what's going to happen. No one knows the hour, but we know they're working steadily at it. Meanwhile, Mossad works with terror groups to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists. That's Kurt Nemo's article up on InfoWars today. Of course, he points out it's obvious that the Western intelligence agencies would have full knowledge if this is proven to be going on as well. There's sources from Iran's press TV citing the same, but these articles have been ongoing for 6 months. They've had attempts on Khomeini. They've had attempts on Ahmadinejad. They've been taking out these scientists, all these other explosions. And it's intelligence ops. There's evidence. It's connected to the Israelis, and you can see it there in the quotes. And they are arming and training and backing the MEK, the Mojahedin-e-Khalq organization, a known terrorist group listed with the State Department as a terrorist group, and yet we have open ties with them. Well, what do you expect? We're openly working with Al-Qaeda, first in Libya. Now those groups have been openly exported to Syria. They'll work with whatever they want and sell whatever lies are convenient to the public. It's just a sad day. Now, turning to the homeland front, sources expose FEMA training camp in Missouri. Alex had on this person today on the air, an anonymous source who's been contracted to work inside a facility at Fort Leonard Woods, Missouri, where he explains how there's been a lot of activity building towards the FEMA training camps. Now, we've reported in the weeks past how they are activating these camps, how KBR has put out bids seeking contractors, people to stand by on 72 hours notice, ready to man the camps at all levels, provide cleanup services, food, catering, but also the fencing services that they can roll out at rapid speed, get it ready to house people in whatever kind of crisis or emergency might be coming. Of course, with the economic crisis always on watch. He said also that he's describing it as a civilian inmate training camp, and told InfoWars he spotted foreign troops as well in maroon and purple uniforms instructing troops on baton tactics and crowd control techniques. So again, this is obviously some form of training of dealing with the American people once the economic crisis or a new war or whatever hits that tipping point, that threshold, that turning point. He said there's been, quote, incredible activity at the camp since the passage of NDAA. And we've seen it in the propaganda and the other reports. It's sad, but that's what direction things are going. A little bit of positive news, at least on the surface. Janet Dung Beetle, as Alex now calls her, Napolitano, will have to testify before the House Subcommittee on Ignorance and Counterterrorizing in the House. EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center group, has gotten these hearings held on, after recently obtaining close to 300 pages of documents as the result of a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit detailing the federal agency's intelligence gathering practices on the web. Among the documents were guidelines for the DHS instructing outside contractors, there's those contractors again, to monitor the web for media reports and comments that, quote, reflect adversely on the agency or the federal government. So here you have the Homeland Stasi network, no longer fighting terrorism, admittedly, if they even ever were, if there even are terrorists, always just spying on the American people, legitimizing the destruction of the Bill of Rights under various pretexts. They'll sell whatever they think they can to the Republic, to the public in what was once the Republic. Meanwhile, they're not only looking for, quote, threats and hazards and evidence of the next big threat, emerging threats, but also any media reports that reflect adversely on the U.S. government or DHS. Now, of course, we reported back in 2010 how DHS was spying on the drudgereport.com, how they were spying on Infowars.com. That came out in Reuters last month, how in early 2010, contractors were 24/7 monitoring Facebook, Twitter, Hulu, WikiLeaks, sites like Huffington Post, and that Drudge Report thing again for any sign of trolling the trolls, of calling out a occupying force for what it is, of saying, hey, that's unconstitutional, what that group is doing. I mean, how dare us? Now, it's great that EPIC got these hearings held. They've come out on free speech and civil rights grounds, of course. Most of their work has been very good. But we have a problem because they're just going to keep going. They show no signs of letting up. People inside this subcommittee have already commented that they want Homeland Security to be monitoring the internet, monitoring blogs, social media for signs of, quote, the current or emerging threats. That would be Reps Jackie Spear and Reps Patrick Meehan, among others. If you think it's good to still contact your members and tell them not to do it. Meanwhile, let's just watch for this hearing. It's going to be Thursday, February 16th. DHS monitoring of social networking and media, enhancing intelligence gathering and ensuring privacy. Admittedly, they have fusion centers set up all across the country, merging with local and state law enforcement to spy on the people, political groups, on and on. You know the deal. But it's always fun to see the dung beetle on TV. And of course, there were reports in 2004 that Homeland Security actually hired the former Stasi spy chief Markus Wolf from East Germany to work for Homeland Security. There's kind of some speculation over whether or not that's true, but hey, that's how they're acting. It may as well be true if it's not literally true. They've obviously adopted that model. They're trying to turn the American people against each other to create a nationwide snitch network. They have a little Infraguard and the other entities, and they really want to just create all-out paranoia. You've seen the reports this week from the FBI where they have page after page of mundane, ordinary American activity, using cash, going to internet cafes, using model airplanes, all kinds of stuff, tattoo shops, going to cosmetic shops, beauty shops. Everything the American people do is considered suspicious and the act of potential terrorism. You've seen all the reports. Just let's face what this is. It's an occupying force. It's disgusting what they have going on, and we should all be worried about it. Meanwhile, Paul Joseph Watson has written about how Homeland Security is now launching, quote, insurgent tracking drones inside America. And they're going to ramp this up on a big $50 million budget. have these drones all over. They've already tapped law enforcement agencies, encouraged their use. You've seen the cases where the news media reported in Houston and other places that they were already testing and using these things. And you, of course, heard about the case in North Dakota where they used the drone to spy on the family with all the acreage that supposedly stole 6 cows. And I don't know if you did see the report also from this week where the European Union is now using drones to spy on and do farmland inspections because it's such vast farmland. They have to use these drones to find fines and things that are against the EU's code of bureaucratic dictatorship for farmland. Turning to other matters, the economic collapse always does these great list articles. This one is good, especially if you're a newbie to the broadcast.